Udeme is day in, day out manages a robust deliverability ops at Wish, including tech standards, policy, compliance, strategy, industrial relations, and more. Wish is one of the largest e-commerce platforms to shop for millions of deeply discounted products on mobile phones. This is the 14th year in digital messaging ecosystem, knee-deep in email delivery, anti-abuse, best practices, and more, both receiving and sending ends of email. Udeme also actively serves in multiple volunteer leadership roles, the board of email senders, and provider coalition committees at MOG, is that how you pronounce it? MOG? And he occasionally speaks and writes an article as well. Matt, I often introduce Matt Vernhout as the smartest guy in email delivery that I've met. I've had the fortune, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of the email community globally, and Matt seems to always know just a little bit more about what happens from the moment you press the send button to your email. So Matt is a digital messaging industry veteran and certified international privacy professional, CIPPC, with nearly two decades of experience in email marketing. Matt's the 250OK's Director of Privacy, and he's currently the Vice Chair of the EEC. After serving for several years as the Chair of their Advocacy Subcommittee, he's a trusted industry thought leader, speaking frequently at email marketing and technology conferences around the globe, and maintaining his celebrated blog, emailkarma.net, and has been my trusted partner in putting this event together.
Thanks very much, Derek. I'm very excited today on many reasons. Just going to go around with this. First off, I get to speak with Udeme, and we've known each other a long time. This is actually our first time speaking together. Yeah, so I'm very excited. I want to just start with email is very important, right? We all know that. That's why we're all here. But just on the scale of things. So, email, there's 160 million messages sent per minute on the internet. That's ridiculous. Like, that's a ton of email, right? We all want to make sure it gets somewhere. That's why we're all here, right? Let's make sure it gets somewhere. For a long time, email ROI, 40 to 1, 44 to 1. Most recently in the studies, this has sort of been ongoing, and I think, from an e-commerce point of view, with Wish, I think that's something that, obviously shows email is very important to those types of businesses. And Cyber Monday, Black Friday, those are huge days for commerce on the internet. So just kind of looking, according to Adobe, Cyber Monday, they predicted $1.6 billion in sales that day. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. Even thinking about sort of the Alibaba Friendship Day, that was a multi-billion-dollar sale day for them as well. So just sort of looking at how much business and revenue email drives, just to sort of start with the importance of it and the importance of getting email to your consumers.
Email's not dead. That's what it means.
That's right. Email is not dead, even though it's been prophesized that way.
So we're going to talk about just simple English. There's a couple of acronyms that are pretty similar in the industry. You hear, delivery, you hear deliverability, but we thought we would take out two keywords to split out the difference a little bit, even though they're both siblings in a way. So delivery is basically the number of messages that you have to send. Then you cut out the bounced ones, and then the ones that actually land on the ground like a runway. That's the delivery email. And then deliverability, which is the twin of email delivery, is the logistics behind all the lists management, proper opt-out stuff, email compliance. That's where the deliverability comes in. So if you look at the bottom, we felt we would say, where did the email go? And how did it get there? That's the playwright, deliverability.
So these are we pulled these out because we love their importance because they're often confused by a lot of people and often misused as well. So just wanted to sort of level set where we were starting from with these patients. I always loved spy versus spy, and I thought this was sort of the perfect thing because they're basically the same thing but different. So that was a great way to sort of start. Email is really easy. Who has dashboards that look like this? Right? It's really easy. It's really easy to understand. There's not much going on in the world of deliverability. There's not much going on in the world of email and understanding how it all works. But just kind of looking around, it isn't rocket science, but it's actually quite complicated. Right? Looking at all the different moving pieces, how many bounces are you getting? How much are you being blocked? Are you having issues with delivery? Are you being authenticated properly? All of these types of things make email complicated, and that's really why we wanted to take a few minutes and talk about that today. So, this is based on all of the 250 OK clients that we work with. So we took a broad view of how all of our clients behave, and we looked at it used to be the big four, but now it's the big three because Yahoo and AOL merged into the Verizon Media Group.
They got married.
So just kind of looking your deliverability day by day. So this is just the 1 month view. It changes frequently, every day. The bar is moving, but in the end, it's still pretty steady. We're looking at 1 in 5 messages approximately not delivering at all, and then in that range you have about half of 4.5%. Sorry, 3.5 messages a day making it to the inbox. 5, and then sort of a half message on average making it to the spam folder. So it's pretty steady. It just changes. It's very seasonal as well. So we just wanted to kind of talk the big picture here. This is probably something that you watch every day with your campaigns when you're sending. So it's also probably very important. Days when it's lower probably directly impact revenue.
And I'm pretty sure everyone in the room can testify that the higher the numbers in terms of the blue part, the happier all our bosses are, the happier the company's wallets are, but there's an interesting equilibrium where you try to factor in, like in the previous session, quantity is not the big factor, quality is more important, but no one is saying you shouldn't have the big quantity part. So you could sending 10 messages versus a million, there's a quantity differential there, but if I can send 999,000 out of 1 million messages that people want, which is understanding the end user's behavior, interest, stepping outside the box. So probably one campaign that worked today will not work tomorrow. So for example, this is Valentine's Day on the 14th in the middle. I don't want to send a Valentine's campaign to Karen in the summer when she wants to be on the beach because Valentine's Day is long gone. So her interest peak will drop. And that's where you may have the orange part increase a little because remember the 1 million user base scenario, the interest level may reduce, and then as we start to see more, and then my boss may get mad. Nothing's going to the inbox where it used to be. I see more going to spam. I said because we're sending people Valentine campaigns when I'm wearing a bikini. Not me, but yeah. So
I've seen that.
Don't record that. So that's kind of the out of the box mentality where it's like a hamster on a wheel, continuously rolling and running, where you gotta keep that in mind when you look at campaigns.
The other thing to remember is every day ISP's filters are changing. So all the campaigns that they looked at that they received yesterday, all the spam complaints they received from end users, all the non-spam complaints they received from end users from messages that delivered inappropriately will impact delivery for the next day. Sort of globally, but also depending on your individual campaigns, it could have a drastic impact on your next campaign. So we're going to talk a bit more about some of that. Just to bring it back to Canada, so I looked at just the Canadian ISPs.
He has to do that, just so you know.
Well, we're talking the Canadian email side. So this is an average of Bell, Rogers Shaw, TextAvi, and Videotron. You can see there's certainly a lot less spam folder placement. Inbox rates are a little higher in Canada, which is great. A lot of this speaks to cleaner list of Castle, speaks to better privacy practices than what we see with some of the US marketers that would also be included in the previous list. And then, spam folder placement is much less on these platforms, simply because they're using a lot more third parties to monitor spam complaints. They're using additional tech that maybe the US isn't, as well as the Canadian marketplace is significantly different. So consumers behave drastically different in regards to how they report spam and who they're reporting it to. So definitely a good contrast to see how the US providers, the big providers in the US, which are also a big deal here, versus the purely Canadian providers are behaving. So what makes this difficult? Filter, right? Coffee, right? Filter. So over the last 18 months, it's gotten a lot more complicated. Right? Filtering is hard enough as it is, and getting messages delivered. But with the mergers of AOL, Yahoo, and Verizon Media becoming the Verizon Media Group, formerly known as Oath. So they've changed names twice in the last 18 months as well, which makes it really hard to remember how to refer to them. So they've moved 2 platforms onto the Yahoo platform. So all that filtering changed, all that history that existed before with Verizon Media's platforms and AOL's platforms is gone. They've changed their feedback loop, they've changed their inbound filtering, literally rebuilt it from the ground up. So that changed a lot of behavior and a lot of the past experience that marketers had when mailing to these domains and the consumers of those domains. So we've really seen a shift, specifically with our client base, in how they've had to change their behavior, change their models, change their targeting to become more relevant, more accurate, and more focused on the consumer's behavior as opposed to simply mailing one size fits all. You want to talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
So, and a lot of us have, to piggyback on what he just said, a lot of us have wonderful favorites, bookmarks in our browser. So Verizon Media Group actually has a beta Postmaster page as of a couple of days ago. If you just jump into Google search, you'll find it. I don't remember the URL. It's not secret knowledge, but I just bumped into it. So moving over to Hotmail, they're a little more weird. That's off the record. So they're just trickier to figure out because it's just a different large mailbox provider or ISP, as some people call it, or receiver. They had a similar, I wouldn't call it mergership, but more of an infrastructure thing about 6-8 months ago. There's no real clarity into how to figure out Hotmail, but it's still really engagement focused, like Verizon Media Group is. That's kind of the standard model for probably every ISP today. They're also heavily focused on engagement, so understanding your end users. They have a Postmaster page. They also suggest certification, but it's a suggestion. It's the days of the whitelist model are not that much anymore. It doesn't matter much. So, and we're part of that same certification too much too. So, probably Gmail will be a similar way to which he could touch on as well. But Hotmail is watch engagement. Consider how the life cycle of your end users lists. So I'm not going to send an email to Matt if he's not opening an email in 11 months and 1 day. You can look at SNDS to figure that out and compare your metrics in-house and his platform, but it's just standard best practice procedure.
So just a question, has anyone noticed in the last 6 to 12 months changes in their delivery rates at Hotmail? Yeah, it's been pretty significant. We've seen a lot of people having concerns, and really the biggest solution that we found is really making sure you're narrowing your target list, narrowing unengaged consumers, rolling them off the file. Castle allows for you to mail for 24 months, but if someone hasn't opened your email in 6, 12, 18 months, treat them differently. It will really make a big impact in getting messages delivered to Hotmail. They've really taken sort of a change from IP filtering or domain filtering and really started looking at engagement filtering. So if you don't have engaged consumers, they're going to put those messages in the spam impactful for those consumers. But your engaged consumers are still going to get them in the inbox. So that's something to be aware of. Gmail is probably, of these three, the most different in how they function. So Yahoo, or the Verizon Media Group, is on the Yahoo platform, very much IP focused in regards to how their reputation system works. Over the last several years, they've spent a lot of time focusing more on domain reputation. So it's not just looking at an IP source of a message, but they're also looking at the domain. So that's something that they've been playing a lot of catch up on. Hotmail is getting there as well, and that's why we're starting to see the changes. But Gmail really came out of the gate with domain level reputation. You know, they started a little later than AOL, they started a little later than Hotmail, but they did catch up and they drastically surpassed them. You know, the average consumer list right now is 50% Gmail between either gmail.com users or Google app hosted domains. So really spend a lot of time thinking about domain reputation if that is your markup or your makeup for Gmail users on your list. So not only do they have filtering that way, but then they also have tab placement. Who here spends a lot of time trying to get the primary tab? Right? Lots of people. Everybody does. We're going to talk about something that might change your opinion on that in just a couple minutes. Gmail's come out with some pretty cool new things that only exist in the promotions tab. So it might change your opinion. There we go. Other things that really impact filtering, so there's lots of different things. Has anyone ever seen this? It's the useless machine, or the pointless machine, or whatever they call it. The idea is you turn it off, and the only thing the machine does is you turn it on, and the only thing the machine does is turn it off. So it's sort of really frustrating, but that's also what causes the filtering concerns and the filtering challenges. They're really frustrating for a lot of people. So authentication, so you have basically 3 different types of authentication technologies right now. You have your Standard Policy Framework, which is an IP-based solution that says, here's the mail servers that my domain send from. You have domain keys identified mail, which allows for a cryptography-based solution that says my message is exactly the same now when you received it as when I sent it. So you can actually compare the tokens. And then the most recent one is DMARC. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. I'm not doing it yet. You're certainly missing out on a ton of data that you could be using to fuel your program and protect your brand and protect your consumers. Bounces obviously are a big deal. Complaints, probably the #1 feedback source that ISPs are using to determine whether they should deliver your message to the inbox or not. Engagement is really.
And then there's also engagement as well. So that's the part where step outside the box to understand how your end users want to get future mail. It's kind of like that approach, or the hamster wheel approach that I mentioned earlier, where the email that was sent today to an end user may not work tomorrow. Just because interests change, people go on vacation, people are sick, it's snowing outside, I can't check my email because I'm stuck in traffic, I got fender bender, just the randomest stuff you can think about. But understanding what may interest the person on that mailing list today may not interest them tomorrow. So for example, at Wish, it's always like a summarized storm every day because we have that e-commerce model that we jokingly call, and don't write this, I call it the poor man's Amazon. So I could buy a man's coat today on Amazon for $10. You could buy it on Wish for $2, but you gotta wait a year or two to receive it. The interesting part is I could buy that guy's camera today, but I need a camera next week, next month. So when the machine learning wants to understand and send you offers to buy another one, then I say, then we start to look at video equipment. So it's unique at Wish, but I'm sure like a lot of your customers, there's always something to figure out the next day in that silly picture. So, but that if you overlap that into the filtering part, like you was mentioning, that's where Hotmail and Gmail and probably the average ISP across the world, they use the engagement examples that we talked about to understand where to place the mail. Because you have to remember, we're the good guys, but they also have to deal with bad guys. The guy in the basement, that has nothing to do. He's probably hammered or drunk, but he has a list he bought from somewhere, he wants to blast it out in 2 seconds. So the ISPs don't mean to be harsh or punish senders or marketers, but that's why all these things matter to make the good guys look more trustworthy.
I would second that. ISPs want to deliver your mail. Stuff that's asked for, stuff that consumers want, stuff that they're engaging. It's beneficial for them to deliver that stuff because it's their customer too. They're trying to make their customers happy. So the balance between what is spammer.com sending versus wish.com, right? Those are the key differences. The challenge is sometimes the things that marketers do that land them in trouble are the same things that people that are sending illegitimate messaging or spam messaging are also doing. So it becomes that much harder to differentiate. And that's why things like authentication become much more important. So filtering folders are a big one. Right? We talked about that with Gmail, understanding where the folders are. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more. And then unsubscribes. So unsubscribes are a metric that everyone should be using too. If you're not looking at your unsubscribe rates on a campaign by campaign basis, you're losing out on sort of the information of did I send something that was irrelevant to my consumer? Or am I over-mailing my consumers? So these are types of things to look at in your metrics and understand unsubscribe rates. So I would say something that's acceptable, bounce rates under 2 or 3% for hard and soft bounces. Hard bounces should definitely be the lower of them. Soft bounces will retry, or what they're called temp fails. Soft bounces is sort of an industry term we've come up with. And then unsubscribes is certainly a big one. So if your unsubscribe rate is over 0.5%, 0.25%, it's probably approaching that point where you might be sending irrelevant messaging to consumers. So those are things to kind of look out for in your messaging strategies and planning sessions. Okay, now to get into some sort of more technical stuff around delivery. So these are ongoing new threats to companies. So obviously phishing, everyone's aware of phishing. Spear phishing is a bit more of a targeted one-to-one. These have become much more problematic for businesses lately, spear phishing, especially when it comes to the business email compromise attacks. So the FBI actually looked. Last year, they figured $12 billion, over $12 billion was lost to business email compromise. And just an example, there's one here. It's a fake email from a CEO saying, we need to make this payment right now. Here's the link. Make sure you pay this invoice. The problem is it's not a real invoice and it's not really the CEO. So there's $12 billion in losses last year on these alone. So understanding sort of how do you combat these, and there's lots of different ways. Authentication helps because it allows you to lock down your domain and really understand are these messages legitimate from your company. And then in building internal processes around multiple checks for who's going to, if there's a change in a payment processor, there should be an offline validation of that. Pick up the phone and call to say, is this really a legit change? There was just a case in England of a lady who actually paid out to scammers, I think about $150,000 from a small business, and the business actually sued her for the losses, saying that she should have known better. She turned around and countersued and said, well, nobody trained me to know better. So there's a bit of responsibility, obviously, on both sides, but being aware of these scams and these types of issues is obviously a first thing, and you want to make sure you're protecting your business from those types of attacks inbound, but also protecting your consumers and your employees and your colleagues from being the target, being that threat vector for your business. I'm sure this is something you guys have seen. Like I know with DMARC, you guys have gone pretty far ahead with DMARC and really lock down your domain, likely because of lots of phishing and targeted attacks.
So luckily, before I joined Wish, we had a reject policy for DMARC, which I said, I have to deal with that. But even though we'll talk about it a little more later, it's basically saying when I have an SPF policy and a recently recycled and reset up, reconfigured DMARC and DKIM record, I have a policy in my DNS that says, if you see email that doesn't support these two authentication methods, reject the email. So there's three types of policies, which we'll talk about later, but I'm basically saying, if he pretends to be me and sends email from, I don't know, Monkey Town, it's going to reject. If the receiving IC provider respects the DMARC what's it called? Policy. So, for example, once in a while I do see fish email, funny enough, about 1 or 2 a month. People pretending to say, reset your Wish account, reset your password or something. So, when those deliver to certain people, it's because maybe it's someone in Brazil, maybe their ISP doesn't support a DMARC policy, so that's why they didn't reject the email. If they did, like Gmail does, and AOL, and a bunch of others, the person would have got the email. So then I have to go through reporting it and getting the domain taken down, but I don't want to block too much about that. So
there's a lot of threats, and there's a lot of this impacts your deliverability. So if you're not monitoring your domain reputation, you're allowing people to sort of piggyback on a good reputation, you certainly have to be aware that these things could happen and could impact your brand. There we go. So we did talk about sort of authentication technologies. We're just going to take a minute and sort of look at them. I kind of look at them like a tool belt. You have your hammer, which is your SDL policy. It's the OG of authentication. It came out early 2000. So it's getting there. In age, it's almost as old as my career in email. It was one of the first technologies that came out. And it's pretty basic in regards to, here's my domain that sends mail, here's all the approved mail servers that send mail on my behalf. Then you have DKIM. I briefly touched on it earlier, the cryptography, public key, private key pair. It basically allows you, again, to authenticate that the message hasn't changed. What we did see, and part of the reason that this technology was developed, was people would take templates, change all the URLs in the back end, and reuse those templates and send them again with phishing links instead. So it would look like your, I remember back when I was actually sending email on behalf of Aeroplan, I remember Aeroplan would send us messages being like, did you guys actually send this from your system? Because they look like legitimate messages, and they use the same subject lines that they would actually have sent in campaigns, but all the URLs were changed. So DKIM allows to prevent some of that. Feedback loops, so ISPs are using feedback loops. This is when someone reports spam, you're getting spam complaints back, and the ESP should be handling those for you, or if you mail on your own platform. These are all the feedback sources, and I would say this is the bare minimum you should be doing for any type of setup with email. If you want to get into the more advanced stuff, that's sort of here on the right-hand side of the page. So TLS, does anyone know what TLS is? Okay, so
transport something.
Transport security. So it's an encrypted technology that allows the conversation between mail servers to remain encrypted so that nobody's eavesdropping on the traffic. So this has become something that's become more and more important. Google actually publishes a list of all the domains that are sending mail to them, whether they're using TLS or not. It's in one of their annual reports as well. So they talk about percentage of mail over TLS, and it's something that they've done a lot of work around trying to push forward. So it's actually a great thing for the privacy community.
And if you're a little curious about what maybe your company's domain looks like from a TLS perspective, you could just punch it. I don't remember the URL, but you could punch in TLS, search Google, and then plug in your domain, it'll tell you. So it's something that your IT department could take a look at.
Yeah, your provider should be managing it as well. So certainly make sure that that's a conversation you're having with your provider. Then we talked a bit about DMARC already, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. But the newest technology coming out is a technology called Udeme. It's a brand indicator messaging identification. And we're going to spend a few minutes on that as well. But it requires the support of DMARC in order to use it. I think this is the one that brands are really going to love. And I think if there's one thing that you go and take away and you're like, I need to look into this more, I want this for my company, it may very well just be big. It's something that we have to, Wish did a lot of it themselves, but we have a lot of our clients get there as well, and start utilizing that technology. So, just to explain sort of how complicated email delivery is. Right. I put this together. So you have spam and viruses and phishing and stuff being blocked with the firewall. Good legitimate mail making it through at least to the mail server, either on an encrypted TLS conversation or an unencrypted conversation, which then does a validation check to the DNS servers of the sending platform, and you either get a positive or a negative result back there. And then you move into sort of the filtering. at the ISP level, which determines where it goes for the end user. And then it was cut off, just top there a little bit, but the yellow line is sort of feedback loops. So this is information sent by the ISPs back to brands, back to ESPs, and platform hosts. And then DMARC, which also sends you back data, a lot of data, which is actually stuff that I think, again, people should be looking at on a daily basis. That really gives you some insight into brands. So just as an example, Twitter turned on DMARC. They were actually one of the first organizations that helped develop the platform. They thought they had 300 mail servers that were sending mail on their behalf. And I got this, the former postmaster is a good friend of mine. They had 3,000 mail servers when they turned it on. So they knew about 10% of their mail technology when they turned it on, and were very, very surprised that 90% of the mail that they were sending, they had no idea about from their own mail team. So that's just sort of one example where DMARC comes through. I've also heard sort of horror stories. Turn on DMARC and they, oh, we only use 3 email platforms, one for transactional, one for commercial, and one for welcome messages. Only to find that they're actually using 18 because they're using one for e-com, they're using another division's using one for CRM, another division's using one for something else. So it really gives you that holistic view and where's all the email that's coming from my domain, reporting to be from my domain, originating from.
So, like you said, that a good example could be even the customer support's Zendesk system. It could be the billing system that Expensify. Maybe, so if I put in an expense report and finance wants me to get a copy of when it was approved, denied, rejected, with my info, you'd be surprised because those third-party platforms have instructions on saying, hey, could you throw in this into your SPF record, or could you add this to your CNAME record, or the weirdest things you think about that is tied to a domain name. So that's where DMARC is like the FBI to help you figure it all out and understand what goes out. So.
Just some other numbers. So DMARC is fairly new. It's only been around about 3 or 4 years. And again, it was sort of an industry group led by Yahoo, Gmail, PayPal, Twitter, and a number of big tech companies got together and said we need to figure this out a little bit better. But as you can see, even between 2016, December 2016, to December 2008, we've had a significant growth. And just year over year, 260% growth in adoption of DMARC at any level. So whether it's a none policy, meaning take no action if there's a fail, to a quarantine, meaning if it fails, put it in the spam folder, to a full reject policy, meaning if it fails authentication, don't accept the message at all. So it's growing. It doesn't look that big, 630,000 domains. But it's certainly, at this rate, next year will be well over 1.5 million domains or more. So it's growing. It's certainly something that more and more people need to be aware of and really sort of help adoption and get that insight. It's great for marketing, from a branding perspective. It's great for your security teams as well. So you can actually share the cost. That's great for helping with your P&Ls and whatnot. And then, like we already said, it helps with anti-phishing, helps with spoofing, gives you some great feedback and some great reporting data about your domain. So there really is no downside to doing a P equals none, because it doesn't change anything other than give you a ton of data that you didn't have yesterday. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
You said everything I was going to say, but we'll see the next slide. So this is an example of which and eHarmony. It's not a market pitch, because I can't market to anyone. So when we turned on Udeme, so that was last May, people didn't quite like the idea, and I said, it's a no-brainer. So Udeme is not fully standard yet. It's kind of like in the diaper phase, it's still being tested.
It's in beta.
So
if you have an interesting group of users at Yahoo, AOL, Verizon.com, this is where you'll see the biggest thing that they're doing right now. more domains, and what I think are coming online, but I'm not allowed to announce anything until they do. So, yeah. It's coming.
So all the things that you would need to have a PV record functional, a working DMARC policy, which of course, without either of these DMARC, either quantity or reject rules, you can't have a DMARC record. And then you need a BIMI assertion record. So that's basically a logo that you can tie to that DNS record. It's just a one-line thing, about 30, 40, 50 characters. And then that's the logo in SVG format. And like you said, the benefits are only seen now at the AOL, Yahoo, Verizon Group, which is Verizon Media.
So SVG just it's a vector image, so it's an image that looks good at any scale, just if that's a new term for you. A lot of icons and stuff are vector images, so they can be as big as you can make them and as small as you can make them. So it just means that it looks like this when it's the size of your thumb, and it looks like this when it's the full size of your screen as well. So, it's something that's easy to implement along with DMARC, and then once you move to a quarantine policy, it will start to work. So it's pretty great. And right in the UI, that's exactly what it looks like when I get it on my email, in the Yahoo Mail client.
And that's either mobile device, desktop, whatever it is. That's what it will look like. So that's why it's specified for that vector format.
And we touched on this earlier when I said, primary folder versus promotions folder. So this is a new innovation from Google. It's called annotations. And really what it is, really what annotations is, it allows you to build a sale card that shows up in your email client that looks just like this. So it allows you to have a prominent coupon code, prominent discount display, an expiry date is put in the UI. You can have an alternate subject line and a hero image built right in to those messages. It's available on all Gmail platforms right now, so mobile and desktop, both Android and iOS. There are some things that you need to do, so it requires a special scripting language. If your email platform does not support JSON scripting language, there is also a microdata option, so it's a slightly different formatting that will support this as well. There are several tools that help you build the scripts you require to do this. There's one on the 253 website that uses the JSON platform. There's also one on freshinbox.com that allows you to do the microdata. So those are two different types of solutions that will allow you to do that. But this is still in early trial stages. Are you guys using this?
Yeah, we worked with the Google team for about 7 months to test a lot of stuff out, but we ran it for about 3 weeks, and I think it's temporarily turned off now for about a month because of other stuff. So, but if you look in your Gmail mobile client and probably desktop as well, if you notice the top clicks part where things look a little different for the last few months, so this is what's behind that most of the time. So.
Yeah, so this sort of snuck out. There was a few brands using it. It kind of snuck out. People started talking about it. Nobody knew how it was done. But now Google has released this in the wild. So it's certainly something to try. Make sure your platform supports. And like I said, there's a couple different options for coding in your solution. Everything that we've heard is even you can use custom URL tracking for your hero image. So you can actually see the impact direct at these messaging platforms. So. The next one is Google AMP. Anyone heard of Google AMP? A couple people? Okay, so Google AMP basically allows for building a fully functional website in your email. I couldn't find the example, but there's an example from Pinterest, which is actually really cool. They were the first ones to come out. They worked with Google to actually build this. So if you ever opened a Pinterest account, one of the first things they do is sort of like, tell us about your interests, and you kind of have to walk through and click 5 or 6 different types of interest categories that you want to receive messaging on, or pins. But if you didn't complete that in the web UI, they actually send you an email where you complete it in the email and then submit from the email back to your Pinterest account. So you didn't even have to leave Gmail to action that. So it's actually Something that's really cool. The reason you probably don't see it as much as you would expect at this point is very limited support at this point from ESPs, because it's an entirely new message type that they have to build into their platforms. And I think right now there's only one that I know of that's doing it, and fully supporting it. So it's coming, it's a new standard. It also, I think, is built on the AMP standard that Google uses for website development. So if that's something that you're looking at getting into, talk to ESPs about support. If you want to try it, I think you also have to enter a specific agreement with Google to get full access to it. So there's lots of different ways to do that. Your platform provider should be able to help you make those connections and start that. So this could be one of the things, the future of email, that we're going to see it. And later in today's day, we're going to have a panel that talks about some of the future tech and where they think email is going. I'm excited. And Microsoft, much like we saw with the Sender ID and SPF when they came out at the same time, they like to do their own thing. They don't want to follow standards, they want to have more control. So they come up with a verified sender. So everyone likes the blue check mark next to their social network icon. Everyone wants one. Microsoft has basically come up with their own version of this. So they'll call it verified sender. Currently, it's only open to U.S. businesses, so unfortunately, none of us, unless you're a U.S. entity, can participate at this point. And from what I've heard, the application waiting period is over a year. So if you have a U.S. counterpart, ask them to start doing the waiting process now. The other thing, similar to Gmail promotions, what we just talked about in the annotations, they do have a promotion callout that will be shown in the browser. Then you'll be able to code, and it'll probably, again, be special coding required just for Microsoft, because standards are few and far between when it comes to the different email platforms. If you ever coded email, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
So, back to the future, not like Michael Fox, but we're talking about email. So, he threw in that city of cool Zoltar
Do you remember what movie this was from? There you go. I wish you did. Tell me the future.
So, just moving back a step to the basics about email. As you could probably tell, authentication is still pretty important. When I used to work at an ESP years ago, what I tried to annoy the EMs, the sales guys, less was try to ask for as much as you could up front before you let them through the door. So it's kind of like getting a credit check. It's like going through a job application. You get grilled in the interview. They won't let you through the door if you don't meet some stuff. No one's perfect for whatever it is. But the basics of SPF, DMARC policy. DMARC is not a must, but it's good to know because it helps you understand what's behind your domain for each of your customers or even yours as a company. Engagement is still a pretty huge factor.
One thing I would add to the authentication thing. So IPv4 space, we're basically run out. We don't have any more IPv4. It's sort of the original backbone of the internet. And IPv6 has started to come out, so it allows for multiple billions of IP addresses. So every device, in theory, will eventually get its own IP address. Sending mail over IPv6 has been mandated that you have to authenticate. So it really has become a no auth, no entry. And LinkedIn really led that charge with if you're sending mail to them over IPv6, if it's not authenticated, they're simply going to reject it. So while it's not required 100% yet, as we continue to move forward into more and more mail sending over IPv6, it will become a mandatory requirement.
And that kind of overlaps into this part, where even though you have IPv6 growing up, you could probably tell there's a slight trend and shift towards domain reputation. So probably in 2007-ish or so, or just a couple of years ago, I could throw IPs to Yahoo and apply for a whitelist and get approved, or priority into special folders or into a folder. But now, if you look at the email authentication landscape, that tells you that domain reputation is getting more weight. It doesn't mean that IP reputation does not matter. So back to the LinkedIn example, there's IPv6 and no entry, but domain authentication is key because you've got phish attacks dancing around. People need to understand who's actually behind the company. So, for example, when I'm at an airport, I get a lot of, ooh, make a wish. I go, no, wish. That's pretty close. And we have 5 brands. One is called Geek. And I had to fight with the marketing team to say, we can't have a friendly from address saying Geek. Because we're not Geek, there's geek.com. So those are 2 examples of the more authentication you have built into your messaging, the more you can see that the reputation matters a lot, because if Gmail didn't care or LinkedIn didn't care about receiving email that's good from Wish, they could allow, I could pretend to be Make-A-Wish Foundation. And yeah, so those are interesting examples to consider.
Accessibility, right? We had the Ontario Accessibility Act come through a few years ago for website design. There are 330,000 people in the U.S. with some sort of vision impairment. So just that's a fairly significant percentage of the population that either has color blindness, partial blindness, or some other vision impairment. So considering accessibility by design, whether it's text rendering, whether it's support for smartphones and speakers, so this is something that we've seen a lot of people looking at now. So if you ask Siri to read your email, she'll read the first 500 characters in an email. So you could actually build a pre-header designed specifically for Siri or for smart speakers, because now that Alexa reads email, to have a specific call to action for audio messaging. That's separate, again, from your call to action in your body of your email. Maybe someone doesn't actually see the email, they have their system read it to them. So instead of, come here to our website and click, maybe it's call our customer support, here's the phone number, they can help you if you have vision impairment. Those types of things, those specific calls to action. You could even have secret calls to action for people that are just doing read audio only. So, as a secret call to action for audio listeners, you're entitled to use this code for an additional 5 to 10% off, just to give it a try, just to see if there's actually an audience out there for you. So accessibility and support for audio, support for other accessible features, whether it's screen enlargement or text enlargement or just responsive design to help people read better. There are lots of people that have machine reading of their emails, again, because of vision impairment. So understanding support for that in your platform will continue to grow. We have an aging population. It's going to be something that's going to continue to be more important. Did you have anything you want to add to that before we take questions? No. All right, so now we have a few minutes for questions, if there are any.
I'm sure there's questions.
Yes.
Hi, Karen Conway from Thank you. Sorry, so the DMARC reject record, and you said that if you have that enabled, our messages rejected, do all ISPs bounce the record, or do some of them just ingest it and not bounce back?
From what I've experienced, they bounce. We've seen bounce records, even Karen and I used to work together in bounce records. Okay. And we've seen messages bounce that say this message failed to mark policy. But like all things on the internet, it depends. I'm assuming some ISPs will accept the message and just delete it. But for the most part, the experience that I've seen is been bouncing. And if you have a good policy, the bouncing mail that's not actually yours. You may actually not ever see the bounces because they're not coming back to you. You would just get a report from the ISP the next day that said your domain was seen this many times, it failed authentication, and we rejected the messages. So it even gives you that type of feedback in regards to how many messages are they rejecting that may or may not be yours. To see, are you being spoofed, are you being phished? Maybe you have a platform that's not authenticated, so you need to go back and sort of look at that. And that's where I think DMARC has that progressive policy. You start with none, so you can get a good landscape of what your platform is doing, what your domains are doing. Then you can move to a quarantine. So you take a step up and actually apply some policy when you feel that you've taken the steps to properly authenticate all your mail. And then once you're really secure there, you can move to a reject policy to say, now I'm really sure, and I'm willing to say, you know, if 99% of my mail is good, there might be 1% that fails or is forwarded inappropriately, and as a result of that, there's another standard that was built called ARC, which is works with DMARC to help reduce some of the breaking with a message being forwarded. So someone sends a message to their Hotmail and they forward it to their Gmail. That can potentially cause some delivery issues, but once you get it to Hotmail, your ESP says it's delivered, and it would have been to the address the consumer gave them.
So I could probably add to your question and what he said. So one proactive approach I tried to do, I think I started a few months ago, was instead of waiting for the problem, I tried to find a way to prevent it. So at all of our companies, we have titles that some people go, "What do you do? What's that?" So I like to joke that I'm the mail truck that delivers the letters every day, but electronically. So, but I use that rumor to get into the different teams and say, hey, if you think you're gonna have a new platform, just let me know. So then the DMARC part comes in of, I'm ready for whatever the stuff they want to set up, a new subdomain, a new whatever it is. So that's where the DMARC part helps in. It's kind of like your domain name's watchdog. So it helps to prevent missing mail it helps to prevent email you may miss, but at the same time, there's a fish perspective where I could have maybe, weird example, an ex-colleague that didn't get along with his boss. He got fired, he got mad, and he bought a mail server, went to his house, went on vacation to maybe Japan, and decided to just spam the company using the wish domain. So if I don't have a DMARC policy set up, and he wants to blast a ton of Gmail addresses because he knows my boss, his wife, his family, they all have Gmail addresses, and there's no DMARC policy. They're all going to get the fish. Click to whatever. But because we do, all those will bounce because Gmail honors DMARC policies. So that's the advantage of DMARC there.
And the only thing I would add to that is you can actually set all your policies at a domain level. So your root domain can have a different policy than a subdomain being used by Zendesk, a different policy than your subdomain being used by an ESP, a different policy than your subdomain being used by your e-commerce platform. So you can really sort of set a policy for all your domains, including your subdomains, or each domain specifically. So it allows you to really have that granular approach and granular coverage. I think we have one more question, or any other questions, comments?
You're the smartest guys in deliverability here. Ask him.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about the Google annotations?
So Google annotations, based on the conversations that I've had with Google, they're not necessarily going to show it to your best consumer, so your most engaged consumer, and they're not necessarily going to show it to your least engaged consumer. What they're going to do is they're going to show it to that group in the middle to try to help you drive those mid-tier engaged consumers to become high-value engaged consumers. So they're actually looking at it, trying to help brands in that regard. But again, they also want you to make sure your message is going into the promotions tab, because that's the only tab that works. So they're really just trying to provide more value for consumers to show them, here's your moderately engaged messaging. That's probably something that is relevant to you and something that you would want to engage with if it was more prominently displayed in your inbox. So it's open now if you want to try it. What I've heard when testing it, sometimes you need to create a new Gmail account. Some of the older accounts haven't had it rolled out yet to the feature, so just create a new account and send your test messages to it. I've also heard if you refresh the page a few times in the mobile app, the chances of it showing up are slightly higher. It's just right now it's not fully rolled out to every consumer mailbox. It's something that Google is, like all things they do, roll it out over time to everybody.
Is there a limitation on the ESP side of that? Full allocation, like are there certain ESPs that don't support it?
So certain ESPs don't support the JSON scripting. I have heard specifically like Salesforce Marketing Cloud will only support the micro data format. So I would check with your ESP to see if they'll support it. And if they do, then certainly try it out. If they don't support the scripting side, try the micro format. And the best way I've seen it explained is put it as a content block and target just Gmail brand domains for those consumers.
Just on that, I'm not sure if there's a reason why you use the JSON. If they both work and JSON doesn't work at all, except I use microdata for that reason. I was like, well, why would I take the chance?
Fair enough, right?
Unless it's something else.
I think a lot of platforms developed by engineers for engineers. They don't always think on the other side to say, as an email developer, not every platform likes scripting. A lot of platforms historically actually remove scripting from messages so that you wouldn't get issues with delivery. I know for a long time, even the Yahoo platform would change certain keywords that are tied to scripting languages in their platform, and you would add an underscore. So even if it was just a normal word like execute in your email, they would put an underscore in front of it just to prevent some type of scripting from running. So times have changed, but yeah, I don't necessarily see a reason to use the JSON format because the ESP supports it. So both. I think we're done. Thanks very much. We're going to take a couple minutes to switch out to the next presenter.